Goliath Resources ist ein Explorer, der über vielversprechende Projekte in einem der angesagtesten Goldgebiete überhaupt verfügt. Wir sprechen heute mit CEO Paul Sabara und Robert Middleton, dem geophysikalischen Berater von Goliath, und lassen uns die Gesellschaft genauer vorstellen. Paul, Bob, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Listen, before we start talking about Goliath, please give us a bit of a background on yourself so our audience knows who we're talking to.
Okay, I'm Paul Sabara. I have a master's degree in geology that I earned in 1979 from the University of Toronto. I've been employed in the mining exploration business ever since. I worked for major companies, and then I was a consultant, and then I started Goliath Resources in the year 2000, and we've been going ever since.
Okay, thank you.
And Bob Middleton, I'm a geophysicist. I have a bachelor's and master's in geophysics from Michigan Tech, but before that, I went to the mining school at Haileybury, so I have a background in metallurgy and fire assaying and mine surveying and mine development. And that certainly helped me later in life because I worked for Rosario Resources of New York on mines in Central America and the Caribbean and in Canada, and found the Bell Creek mine for them in Timmins. And that will come up later in our conversation, and also drilled the discovery hole at Goliath when I was the manager of Newmont Exploration.
Interesting. So now please tell us about Goliath then. Perhaps we could start with a short introduction to the Red Lake, where the area or the district where your projects are located. As far as I understand, one of your neighbors made some pretty amazing discoveries recently.
Yes, well, Goliath, as I mentioned, was founded in the year 2000, but for the last 18 years, we've been working in Mexico, where we staked and developed 8 projects. I sold those projects to a major mining company in Mexico and decided to move to Ontario. And there's an area in Ontario where there's a gold play being developed. It's a major mining camp with a big history. And it was a resurgence of exploration started in late 2018. And that's when we got our money from the big Mexican mining company, and we decided to move into that area. So the Red Lake area is in northwestern Ontario. It has many mines. Bob, can you give us some production figures there?
The camp's produced in excess of 25 million ounces. It's the 3rd largest producer in Ontario after Timmins and Kirkland Lake.
Okay, interesting.
The resident geologist in that district for the government is a classmate of mine. His name was Andreas Lichtblau, and he knew more about Red Lake geology than anybody. He retired in February of 2019, and he joined Goliath's advisory board, and he helped me locate some properties that were very exciting in the heart of the camp, just as it was developing. And you know, he really liked the properties, he walked the properties, and so we acquired those 2 properties, plus another one in another area of Ontario. Unfortunately, in October of last year, Andreas contracted leukemia, and he passed away in October. But we were already on our way with respect to the properties, and they're important because of major deep-seated fault structures that they have, which is also present, or the similar structures also present on the Great Bear Resources property. When we first acquired our properties in Ontario, Great Bear was probably trading at 50 cents. And since that time, they're now $8.85. And there's one property in between Great Bear and Goliath's Kwai property. It's the BTU property. And they've now made a discovery that also seems to be related to similar structures. And their shares have jumped from 5 cents to 25 cents recently.
Okay,
and
so
we
very prolific.
anticipate doing more exploration on these properties. We have excellent drill targets right now defined by our geophysics, and we want to explore those targets and hopefully move into the same range as Great Bear Resources.
So exciting times for you then. So tell us about what the properties are called, Kwai and SLF, I think. Tell us a bit more where they're located, and well, what did the geophysics you mentioned, why did they make you think there's gold on Kwai, for example?
Well, the Kwai property is located just below BTU. So I think you'll see a slide where there's the Great Bear property, and then south of that is the BTU property, and then south of that is our Kwai property. On Great Bear's property, their gold is located in a major deep-seated fault called the LP fault. And that fault runs northwest-southeast. And on our Kwai property, we have a major deep-seated fault called the Packwash fault, and it's running east-west. And just a couple of kilometers south of Kwai is our SLF property, and it hosts the Sydney Lake fault, which is another deep-seated fault that runs east-west. And seismic data from the Ontario government, when they were looking for places to bury nuclear waste, we got a hold of that seismic data, and we can see that those faults are all interconnected at depth. It's one deep plumbing system, and that some of those faults also lead off into the Campbell Red Lake mine further to the north. So that's a very important deep-seated plumbing system that can feed gold into all of the properties. And we did some induced polarization work on our Kwai property when we first acquired it. That would have been about a year ago right now, located on some small splays along the major structure. And the IP work that we did there turned out some spectacular results. The geophysicist, John Grant, who conducted that work, knows Bob Middleton, and when he saw the results, he sent them to Mr. Middleton without telling them where they were from. Now, Mr. Middleton, he discovered a mine in Timmins called the Bell Creek Mine, and when he received the email with our data, he replied, "Why are you sending me IP data from the Bell Creek Mine?" And Mr. Grant explained it's not from Bell Creek, it's from a junior company, Golden Goliath Resources, who now has a property in the Red Lake camp. And maybe Bob will now tell you a little bit about that geophysics.
Yeah, certainly.
Okay, the area had been flown with magnetics, and with that, we're able to identify the Packwash fault quite finely, and we think it's a refolded structure coming from the Great Bear property through the BTU property and into the Packwash fault area on the Kwai property. The ground geophysics was induced polarization that was used on test lines just to see what was going on. And what I saw immediately was a structure in the data that was identical to the geophysics I did on the Bell Creek discovery. So they have shear zones running along the fault, parallel to the fault in mafic volcanics, and the chargeability tells you you have sulfides in those shears, and that's the host for gold mineralization. So that's why I'm very confident they have a zone on this property, and they need to do more lines now.
Oh, that's going to be my next question. You have that data, you have the properties. What are the next steps in progressing your projects? Are you drill ready? Do you need to define those targets more? Tell me a bit more about that.
Well, the targets we have are almost drill ready, but we've only done 2 grids in a small part of the property. The major structure runs for 10 miles.
Okay.
And so to do IP all along that 10-mile stretch would be very, very expensive. So we now have an airplane going to do an airborne geophysical survey that will give us even more detail on the magnetics, but it'll also measure the resistivity. So we will look for other potential hotspots along that major Packwash fault where we will go in and do more IP. So we'll have our current IP targets plus the new IP targets, and then we will take a soil auger, basically to drill through the 3 meters of overburden and take a sample of the bedrock and the basal till on these IP targets to see which ones have the highest gold values. And then we will drill those targets in order of priority based on the gold content.
Okay. So a
We
lot of
should be
work
able
to,
to do all of that by the middle of this summer.
okay. So that's not so far off. A lot of work to do. You're starting out now. It certainly sounds promising. We'll be sure to follow up later on once some results are out and see how it all went. Now, to sum up a bit, to clarify for our audience, why should they think about taking a position in Golden Goliath now at this point in time?
Well, we have excellent targets in one of the hottest, probably the hottest gold play in Canada right now. It's the only major belt in a mining camp in Canada that is not controlled by a major mining company. An Australian group just came in and bought the old Campbell mine and a lot of the properties to the north, and they may end up taking over the whole camp. With respect to Golden Goliath itself, we're very good at conserving our money. We haven't done a financing in over 7 years. We have $1 million Canadian in the bank. That money came from selling my projects to the big mining company in Mexico. And we have an excellent management team, excellent property, and excellent targets. And of all the money the company has ever spent in 20 years, 70% of it has always gone into the ground. We do not waste money. We have a very small office. Our goal as professionals is to find a gold deposit in the Red Lake camp. The share price is low now, so that's a good reason to get in. Once we start making a discovery, we hope that share price will increase significantly.
Okay.
And I could add to that, if you don't mind, the activity next door by Great Bear, they got 4 drills running, and they're releasing gold assays as time goes on as they develop their deposit. A number of major investors have stepped into that project and financed it at $8.35 to raise $14 million. So they got a lot of money now to do a proper drill job on that property. And then our other friends, BTU next door, are following up on a brand new type of discovery. It's a stringer copper zone that represents what's called a VMS type deposit. But I think it's a VMS system that's older, that's overprinted by a gold system. They now have several gold anomalies on their property to follow up. And as they produce information, it helps us all understand how all this plumbing is connected. And I'm certainly confident that there will be a deposit on the Kwai property given the geophysical data that I've examined.
Yes. And the new discovery on the BTU property is called the TNT showing, and it's only a couple of kilometers from the Kwai property, and they're moving south towards our property. So we've got a great address, and all the factors are in our favor.
Okay. Certainly sounds exciting. We'll see how it goes. And as I said, we talk to you again. Probably, or perhaps we can even meet up at PDAC, which isn't too far off, and you can give an update to our audience then.
Yes. I would recommend people look at our website, www.goldengoliath.com, and if you go to the Kwai property page, you will see a PowerPoint presentation that describes everything that we've been talking about. It shows the deep-seated seismic structures that go down 15 kilometers, although our targets are close to the surface. But you'll see how the plumbing is connected. You'll see our geophysical data, and you'll hear and read the comments of Mr. Middleton and also of Mr. Grant.